A natural disaster as floodwaters swamp the town centre of Queanbeyan. Victoria's northeast on tenterhooks as local rivers burst their banks. Ugly scenes outside court as 3 men are jailed over a deadly brawl. And the buck stops there. Kevin Rudd points the finger on WikiLeaks.
The Americans are responsible for that.
Good evening. They're calling it a once-in-a-lifetime flood. The city of Queanbeyan, just outside Canberra, has been declared a natural disaster zone after the local river rose 3 metres in just 3 hours. While Queanbeyan is the worst affected, it's not the only part of the nation under water tonight. The Murrumbidgee is on the rise again, meaning another anxious wait for outlying areas of Wagga Wagga. In Victoria, there was a dramatic rescue at Whittlesea and river levels are peaking in the state's northeast. In South Australia, mopping up is underway north of Adelaide after 3 rivers nearly broke their banks. And in Queensland, there's a severe weather warning tonight for flash flooding in the state's west. But first to Queanbeyan, where the worst floods for 20 years have forced scores of people from their homes and left the city centre inundated.
The rising floodwaters took emergency crews and Queanbeyan residents by surprise.
It's coming through the front and back doors. It's probably 75 centimetres inside. It's flooded right throughout. We can't hold it back with the sandbags.
You know, the river rising that quickly, peaking at 8.4, it's certainly at the moment about a 1 in 20 year event.
The city was hit by a deluge of 100 millimetres of rain overnight. Water spilled over the top of Gugong Dam and flows rushed down the Queanbeyan River, lifting water levels by 3 metres in just 2.5 hours.
We've had the town cut in half. We've had around about 100 houses and businesses which have been asked to evacuate.
Practically while we were watching, the bottom end of the street down there started to go underwater.
Some residents had to be rescued by the State Emergency Service, while water flooded car parks and local businesses.
There's really nothing else I can do and hope the insurance will pay.
A crane was brought in to move cabins at the caravan park to higher ground. The river peaked at around 11 o'clock this morning and waters have started to recede. After years of drought, at least one resident isn't too worried.
We need the water. We need the water.
Perhaps not all at once. Julie Doyle, ABC News, Queanbeyan.
In New South Wales, concerns for Wagga Wagga are easing tonight. It now appears unlikely the centre of the city is at risk. But in some parts of the riverina, the Murrumbidgee rose by 4 metres in 4 hours overnight. In the northwest of New South Wales, residents of Dubbo are also on flood alert. And there's heavy rain over the Macquarie River just days after it burst its banks. Here in Victoria, the flood threat is by and large easing, but towns in the northeast are still on high alert as water streams down from the mountains. There are major flood warnings for the King, Ovens and Buffalo rivers, and the Broken River at Benalla is expected to peak tonight. Anna McDonald filed this report from Myrtleford.
Day 2 of flooding in Victoria and the fears of many have been allayed.
It's not looking like we're going to be near the September level across the whole region, but clearly in the areas that are being impacted with major flooding for those local areas, that's a significant thing for those communities.
150 millimetres of rain has fallen in the upper catchment and it's now a waiting game. This is just one of a handful of caravan parks that have been evacuated. Many of the residents have been moved to a relief centre in Wangaratta. 194 millimetres of rain fell at Falls Creek, closing sections of the Great Alpine Road.
I would ask that the people on the roads just obey the signs, obey the instructions given to you by police members who are on site. Don't drive through any flooded water.
In Benalla, many roads were cut and the local cricket competition will be washed out.
The footy grounds are all under again. The whole 3 of them are all under and it's not looking good for footy or cricket.
Water flooded backyards, but most homes remain unscathed for now.
We don't need a swimming pool now where we've got this in our backyard.
Little rain is forecast for the northeast of the state over the coming days, but major flood warnings are still in place.
and the peaks in these rivers as the water surges downstream are expected to be of a similar level to what we saw in September.
It's mid-afternoon here at Myrtleford in the northeast of the state, where the nearby Ovens River is well and truly peaking. It'll take 3 to 4 days for the water to make its way downstream, but the SES says there's no major threat to nearby towns.
5,000 SES volunteers will tonight be on standby across the state, with all eyes on the rivers as they begin to break their banks. Anna McDonald, ABC News, Myrtleford.
And a Melbourne man had a close call last night when he was swept away by flood waters at Whittlesea. The 51-year-old was walking home and took a shortcut across a fast-flowing creek. He was swept 100 metres downstream and clung to a tree for survival. Friends found him calling for help 3 hours later.
Water police arrived in the boats. We had to carry it over some of the fencing. They also had to cut through some fencing, and when they made it to the tree, they had to actually break through a fair foliage of the tree. As the male who was caught in the river actually climbed up the tree to try and keep himself out of the water.
The man was suffering from exposure but is expected to make a full recovery.